Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for November 11, 2022, Veterans Day edition. And we don't have a story about veterans or Veterans Day. I would just ask you to think about veterans, what they mean to this country, why we are the land of the free because of the home of the brave. So our first story is from the FT, which has a really interesting story on how Qatar got the 2022 World Cup. We have details, human rights violations, bribery and corruption allegations, and how one of the world's smallest countries, but oil rich, was able to secure the world's biggest sporting event. Next up from the Washington Post, in a massive lawsuit, the Office of the District Attorney of the D.C. District Attorney Carl Racine filed a consumer protection lawsuit against the Washington Commanders, Daniel Snyder, the NFL, and Roger Goodell, accusing them of colluding to deceive and mislead consumers about an investigation into the team's workplace to maintain the franchise's fan base in pursuit of revenue. Well, of course they did, because the report was so bad. Whether that's actionable or not is a different question. But if it forces the release of the report, that's probably a good first step. Next up, the U.S. Transportation Department's Office of Inspector General said it will audit the FAA's, or the Federal Aviation Authority's, oversight of the inclusion of the MACAS, MCAS, a key airplane software feature of the M737 MAX design, which is often cited as a contributing factor in the 2 fatal crashes, which led to the massive series of lawsuits involving Boeing. The cultural corruption and fraud by Boeing is separate and apart from this. Nevertheless, the FAA oversight review will be certainly something that is needed, and hopefully we will get some more answers from this report. And our final story comes to us from the Columbus Dispatch. The FirstEnergy Corp defendants, in the form of two current Ohio Republicans, are going to trial in January for racketeering charges, and they want to keep the FirstEnergy DPA out of evidence. There's 30 pages of admissions in there, and of course it shows that they received cash payments or other remuneration for services rendered. So, of course, they don't want that in. Good luck, guys. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.